For those of you who haven't met, my name is Melinda Jensen. I work for Hdsa. I'm a Regional Development Officer for the Northeast region. Thank you all for joining us today for this session. We have our speakers today, Lori Travis, Katie Moser, and Dr. Marissa Dean. I'll let them do their introductions, but before we get started, I just want to remind everyone the Q&A is available in the Hdsa Convention app. So if you have any questions as we go through, type those in and I will go through them and have our panelists answer your questions. And with that, I will let them take over.
Hi, everybody. My name is, can y'all hear me? My name is Lori Travis, and I am relatively new to the HD community. I am the Georgia chapter president for the Hdsa. My husband, Blake, was diagnosed with Huntington's disease back in 2017. We did not know what HD was prior to his diagnosis. His mom had been, we believe, misdiagnosed with Parkinson's, so we thought he had Parkinson's. And it wasn't until we traveled down the path of going to a specialist for Parkinson's, they determined that it wasn't that illness, did a whole lot of testing for about 6 months, and then we ended up at Emory in Atlanta, where we were told it was Huntington's disease. That was in September. And then I guess it was in December, Blake went and made the decision to get genetic tested. He came back positive. And since then, I have been getting more and more active in the community because I love my husband and everybody in the community is really great.
Introduce yourself? Sure. I'll do a quick introduction. Doesn't sound like it's on. Is it on? Okay. Doesn't sound like I'm very loud. So my name is Marissa Dean. I'm a movement disorder neurologist at University of Alabama at Birmingham, which is one of our Hdsa Centers of Excellence. So I'm going to have a small part today talking about what I wish I knew then that I know now about early Huntington's disease. And I will kind of go more into my story in a little bit.
I'm Katie Moser. Yeah, I've been in, this is my, I don't even know how many conventions. I've been coming since 2006. So I'm an occupational therapist. I've worked with within a facility that has a 48-bed Huntington's disease unit. And I also come from an HD family. So I'm going to go into more of that when I talk.
So I'm going to start off. This is the standard disclaimer language. This is basically saying that I think it's for informational purposes only. Whoops. And then there's this one that we're supposed to show. But a few things that I wish I knew in the early stages before Blake had been genetic tested and before we got further down the path was something about the disability insurance. He had disability insurance through his company, but we didn't have any extra disability insurance. So prior to his testing, it would have been nice to have actually gotten some additional long-term disability. It would have helped when he had to stop working. Blake stopped working relatively quickly after he was diagnosed. He was starting to have some issues with memory, which was what prompted him to actually go see a doctor. Up until then, I had seen little signs that there was something going on, a little bit of movement. He has severe chorea. And there was just little things that started. So I did not think anything about it. As I said, I didn't know anything about HD. I figured we had enough insurance through his company. We have enough, but it would have been nice to have a little bit supplemental. He was able to get on Social Security disability very easily. We actually hired an attorney to help us, so if you are having some problems, I would tell you to seek some legal guidance. They can help you through the Social Security insurance, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more than what we have. Additionally, we did not We do not have long-term care insurance. That would be something that I would recommend that everybody try to get prior to the testing. I don't know enough, and because we didn't know about HD prior to his diagnosis, whether he could have gotten it if there was a history in his family. That would be something that you would have to ask the, maybe not ask them because they would say no, but just sort of go under and try to figure it out earlier than we did, because we do not have that either. And then the other thing is life insurance. Blake and I do not have any children. I know a lot of people get life insurance when they have children. We figured we would both be working well into our 60s. We would retire. If we were fortunate enough to retire early, we would figure it out then. We would be financially independent. So we didn't think we needed life insurance. It just would have been something else that I wish we had taken a little bit closer look into prior to his clinical diagnosis of HD. Some of the other things that I kind of wish I knew then that I know now is that there was a period of time when Blake got diagnosed for about a year. I felt very isolated. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I felt like it was a death sentence. I was afraid. I was scared. I didn't realize how much there is out there for not only the caregiver but the patient. It would have been nice to lean in on that much earlier than I did. I felt that once I got involved, it brought hope, and I had lost that for a little bit. So the Hdsa.org, there's so many resources out there that have helped. They have virtual support groups. Your local support groups, if you're lucky enough, we're in Atlanta, so we have a support group in Atlanta at our Center of Excellence at Emory. They do a fantastic job. Even through the pandemic, we were able to meet virtually. And now, even after, I think it was slightly, probably mid-pandemic, was when they were able to break us out into different rooms where the patients were in one Zoom room and the caregivers were in another. Initially, we were all together. I really liked that when they split us, because there's just certain things that Blake may have wanted to discuss with other people that he didn't want to talk to about me, or things that I just wanted to ask that is not really an issue between Blake and I, but I just wanted to kind of know if there was somebody else going through the same thing I was. There's also personal counselors and therapists. I did see a personal counselor after he was diagnosed. I had started to go into a spiral where I was depressed. I felt like we had no future, and that's clearly not right. We've been wonderful for the last 5 years, but I had to deal with some of my personal stuff. It's amazing what comes up when you get some diagnosis like Blake did. Family and friends. I can't tell you how much I have relied on our family and friends. Family is my number one. We live very close to my family, and his family is a little further away, but I rely on them a lot. We have some super great friends. Blake has one of his best friends who has come up and will stay with him for a week. That gives me an opportunity to go and pursue other opportunities. I bake cookies on the side, so I was able to go to a cookie convention, and Tony was able to come up and he helped us, so I'll never be able to repay him for that. And the last thing is your HD doctors and their staff. I feel like the doctors that we have are phenomenal. I know Dr. Factor has been a fantastic influence in our life, so make sure you make those connections early. We did not get involved, like I said, for a while, but then now Blake is he's in at least one study, and I think that the support staff that we have through Elaine and Dr. Factor and Amy at Emory is just amazing. We couldn't do anything without them. So one thing I would say is just lean in, get involved. It's a great community. There's lots of resources, and everybody's here to help you. And then these are just some pictures of Blake and I through the years, some of the people that we rely on. That's Blake and I in the corner up there on the top left. We were in Alaska. We do travel still. We're going to visit the national parks later. Just because he has a diagnosis of HD doesn't mean that we're shutting everything down. While he can, we are still going to be doing as much traveling. Darn pandemic put a little cramp in it, and then these are some of Blake's family in the middle, and then just us. That's my family down here, and then those are some of his best friends. So that's kind of, just lean in on them. You need them. And then, these are some of my takeaways. Once you get a diagnosis, whether you're the patient or the caregiver, allow yourself some time just to kind of get used to it. I allowed myself a year. I think that might have been a little bit too long, but because I do think that if I had reached out earlier, I think I would have had hope earlier. I would have been able to help more people earlier. But assess your needs for the future. Insurances, what kind of insurances you're going to need. Advanced directives. Make sure that you take care of all of that early. We did that very soon after he was diagnosed. We went to an attorney. We got our wills updated. We did medical power of attorneys. We did advanced directives. More because I wanted to make sure that what his wishes are, they were down early before the disease took over, and then he wasn't really able to articulate what he really wanted, and it was me making a decision that he may or may not have chosen. So we did all of that very early on. I'm also in the legal field, so that was where I went. Social Security and Medicare. As soon as Blake stopped working, we went and we applied for Social Security because there is a wait limit. There's a period of 6 months. So he stopped working in October, and in November, we were down at the Social Security office taking care of all the paperwork. He was approved and he started getting Social Security in April of the next year, the 6 months after. There is the 2-year wait period for Medicare, so there was that period of time I was a little nervous with job situation, just making sure that we had him covered for insurance. He was on my insurance, but now he's on Medicare. So I'm really hoping that the Parity Act actually gets passed, because that would be fantastic if they could get it sooner. And then just some other considerations. Kind of sit down and talk to your loved one about what they want to do. Does Blake want to travel? Would he rather have friends over? Does he want to stay in the house that we're at? We actually ended up moving into a house for work situation, but we had a house that was 3 stories. It had a basement and then an upper and a main level. Prior to his diagnosis, but I kind of had an idea that he had Parkinson's, we talked about moving. We bought a house that's a ranch. So the main living is on the master's on the main, everything's on the main. We do have an upstairs, but it makes our life a little bit easier. It's a smaller home. Our home the outside is taken care of, so he doesn't have to do some of that stuff. So those are just a couple things. The other thing is just, remember to be patient with yourself and with your loved one. Blake sometimes it takes him a little while to articulate what he wants to say. I have to remind myself to slow down and just be patient with him. And then, you're both dealing with HD in your own way. So, just love your partner, love your loved one, be there for them, and enjoy every moment that you have with them. So that's kind of my story and what I wish I had known then. The last thing I say is that there's always hope. There's a lot of hope. Blake is further along in the disease, but I see all these young people, and I really pray that there is a cure, or at least something to slow the progression. So now I'm going to pass it, I think, to Katie, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Katie. I mentioned before I'm an OT, but I also grew up in an HD family. I don't really remember what my slides look like. How do I do it? There we go. No, that's you.
Oh, that's me. Sorry. That's me if you want to get in touch with me. Call me.
All right, so I grew up in an HD family. My grandfather, when I was young, he started to develop movements, and he'd get very angry. And we learned it was Huntington's disease. And I don't have very many good memories of him. My family didn't talk about it, so I started to think that Huntington's disease made you angry. Like that was the symptom. And I wanted to know. I wanted to know more. I knew it was genetic. Every science book I got, I would open it up and see if there was a section on HD. So I ended up going to school and studying occupational therapy. My grandfather passed away during my senior year of college. He had been living at a facility in Manhattan that has a 50-bed Huntington's disease unit. And I hated going there because I didn't like seeing everybody. But when I graduated college, I saw a job listed, and I thought it would be good to just go for interview experience. And I would, visit a cousin that was living there at the time. They offered me the job, and I took it. Because when you need a job, you need a job. And it's a large facility. It's 700 beds. So, I did get to see a lot. But I really got to see a lot of HD. And I got to see what I, as an OT, can do to help my residents, making it safer for them or helping them move. I got to see that HD doesn't make you angry. My residents, they might get mad, but then they'd get over it. Like I could see what a mood swing was and what, just what their behaviors were and how I could help. So I got to learn more, and I, learned more about my family. I was going to make like a family tree of my family and everything, but there's too many of them. I learned more about HD, and I learned that I could go to a local center of excellence and find out my genetic status. So I went to Columbia, which is in Manhattan, and in 2005 I found out that I do have the genetic mutation for Huntington's disease. And I did not want to be like my family. I didn't want to not talk about it. I wanted to tell my friends. I wanted to educate. So we had medical students that would come into our facility once a month they would do their rounds on the HD unit. And I was one of the talks that they sat through where I shared my story with them. I started working with Hdsa on fundraisers and just started getting a little more involved. I then shared my story in the New York Times. So in 2007, I was on the front page of the Sunday Times, and the reporter had followed me for a year to write this article. So it was a big article. It started on the front page. It was 2 full pages inside. From there, I was invited onto The View, the Hallmark Channel, and NPR, BBC, Nova, just a bunch of random stuff. The New York Times, actually, this bottom corner, that's my puppy, Penelope. But they just did a kind of a brief follow-up last year when I turned 40. But I just started to get more involved and just share my story. I ended up going to work for a pharmaceutical company. We launched the first product for Korea associated with HD back in 2008. And I worked for them and connected with the HD community, both here in the United States and around the world. And I got involved with the National Youth Alliance as an NYA member. I finally found the family that wanted to talk about HD, that wanted to provide each other with support and build a community. So that's, something that's been very important to me. But it's hard to think if I knew then what I know now, because it's been such a long time and it was such a process to get to a point where, I am well connected and able to talk about it. Because I personally was always wanting to, but if I thought about things that have happened over the years, one thing was getting my family to talk about it. So I do have aunts that are symptomatic, and I have distant family members, like, second cousins that have become symptomatic. And when I came out in the New York Times, I had family members, like, cousins that are loosely related call me and thank me because they wanted to talk about this, but because it was our big secret, they were always afraid to say anything. But I found that I started out, I'd talk about myself. I would talk about myself and that I had the gene. And with my family, with my aunt, I'd talk about myself. And then I might talk about my residents on the unit. I would talk about things that they'd done. Sometimes I'd make up stories and be like, somebody was having a hard time swallowing today, so we gave them more gravy. And it was, then it would kind of clue in like, oh, let's have more food with gravy at home. It kind of would clue in that they'd think, but it was this process, this gradual process of talking about me and then talking about HD in general that finally led us to be able to talk about my aunt and her symptoms, and she started to acknowledge that she was losing control of her movements and she was, needing more help. And, at one point she had a fall, and I remember it. We were at the VFW, but she fell off of a stool, and she did get hurt, and we got her home, and she came walking out of the bathroom, and she said, "Katie, I have Huntington's disease." And I just looked at her and I said, "I know," and I thought, oh, this is it. We're finally going to be able to actually talk about this. And then the next day it was like it never happened. But gradually over time, it was a long process, but now we are able to talk about it. When it was time for her, she'd never wanted to go into a facility, but it did become time. So I was working at a new facility at this point, and we actually moved her into where I was working. And, it was just it was a long process, but it did eventually happen. So that, I guess that's one of my big takeaways is that it takes time. It takes time and it takes effort. And, I just thought by my going and getting tested, we'd be able to talk about things but it was years before we were able to do that. Now my family's rather open about it. Some of them came to the Boston convention, and, they have gotten more and more involved with fundraising. We've done things. We did the New York City Marathon for Hdsa, and so that's been a big thing. And I don't even know. It is different, but that's my cousin Jimmy on the left side. That was from the Times piece, and then on the right, that's my Aunt Loretta. So she moved into my facility, and we were able to get her care. But other things that if I knew then what I know now, like Lori said, just the support of the HD community. It is there, and there's. Back when I tested in 2005, we didn't have all these resources. We didn't have, Hdsa had their website and stuff, but, the resources that, I have another slide later on that are just available for people. The fact that, you can be at home watching this talk right now. And if you wanted to watch this talk tomorrow, you can go on to the app or into the Hdsa website and see it. If you wanted to watch them from years ago, they now have started putting them online. So all this information is out there, and not just through HDSA, but also Ed and Jeff have HD Buzz. There's a lot of information out there and available now. It is important to, when you are new to HD, don't go looking up all the information, all right? Because it can be very overwhelming, and you want to make sure that when you are looking for information, you're looking at, sites like HDSA or the Huntington Study Group, because you want to make sure that when you are getting information, you're getting the right information, because there could be a lot out there that could be misleading. And I mean, coming to convention, coming to the Team Hope walks in your areas or local HD education days, being able to connect with other people, participating in fundraising, just giving yourself something meaningful, to be able to be a part of it. And people have had fundraisers. I mean, at the awards luncheon, you saw all the pictures, from different events across the country. But there were people in Missouri that, they had like an old house and they liked tea. So they'd have like a tea party, and the people would come and participate in this fancy little tea party, and that was their fundraiser. My first big fundraiser was, back in the day, HDSA, they'd have like this hoopathon. Iowa, I think, still has a hoopathon. Iona College in upstate New York has a hoopathon, but it's basketball hoops. And I didn't have access to basketball hoops, but as an occupational therapist, I had a lot of hula hoops. Not really sure why, but we had them. So I turned the hoopathon into a hula hoopathon. So we but it was something that I could do, within my own, my friends and my own community, to be able to feel like I was doing something. And then gradually getting more and more involved, and like I said, sharing my story. It's kind of just developed over time. And I think, I have my this is my puppy. I had to leave her home because it's not dog friendly here, but she's also just a puppy and she'd be destroying things. But she's in my presentation. So this was my slide of just different resources, because like I said, there is a lot out there, and you just want to make sure that you're getting it from reputable sites and people. But, being connected through HDSA, going to a center of excellence, a place that knows Huntington's disease and has the resources available is really important. There's so many different types of research projects these days, which you can find out through HSG or HDSA, that you can get involved in. Again, when I went through testing, we had like one study that you could follow up on. It was basically like anyone in an HD family could participate, whether you tested or not, because they want to get all of this information, this family history, and how people do progress over the years. But now there's studies that there are studies where you would take a potential drug, but then there's studies that they want to know how your body functions under stress, so they strap you up to all of this, a heart monitor and something that measures your oxygen and make you ride a bicycle. There's studies where they're trying to find biomarkers. Downstairs, they're actually collecting blood samples, and that's something you can participate in. I've done 3 spinal taps, and I've done multiple MRIs, and I've done them in Connecticut, New York, Iowa. I'm going to go to Madison, Wisconsin. And all of these studies, they pay for you to go. So it's not something that you have to put out financially. Like they want to get you to participate, and they have this funding available. So they'll fly you to the sites and, help you through the process. So getting involved in these studies is something that's, there's just more and more of them available. And a lot of them have booths here at the conference or booths available online. So, going to find out what information's there. I was able to find out about 2 that maybe my nieces and nephews could participate in, because who doesn't want to go to Iowa? So, it's just kind of, there's a lot more resources now available to us. And it's, it's a lot of great support, and it's like having a bigger family. That's the end of my slides. Okay, I'm just going to check. Oh, it's slow to go.
Great. Thank you. All right, so I have my notes here. You guys can all hear me. So again, Marissa Dean. I'm the co-director of our UAB Center of Excellence. And so I really took some time to think about what I wanted to talk about today. So stating, what I wish I knew then, what I know now. I tried to think, well, what is the then? Okay, so when do I want to think about what was the then? Because Huntington's disease, I didn't really, I say Huntington's found me when I first started working with Huntington's patients, but that wasn't until fellowship. And so I decided to first start with what I wish I knew when I was starting my training. Medical training, whether you're a provider, you're a therapist, you're a dietitian, anyone who's interested or is thinking about working with the HD community. And so a little bit about my story or how I came to Alabama. I'm originally from Michigan, so grew up in Michigan, did my training there, was interested in neuroscience, neurology, studied that in undergrad at U of M, went to Detroit at Detroit Medical Center. I did my medical school residency training there, and then came to Alabama for fellowship, and I've been there now for the past 4 years. And so my first patient, so you learn about Huntington's disease when you're a student. Or in medical school, everyone learns about Huntington's disease, right? It's your pure genetic disorder. Everyone has chorea. It's adult onset. Like, we learn all of the common presentations of HD. So you read about it in a book. You don't actually see patients. And so all throughout medical school, I never actually saw one Huntington's patient. It wasn't until I was a third-year resident, so now I've been seeing patients for, 7 years, and I finally saw my first Huntington's patient. It was in clinic. This patient came in a wheelchair from a nursing home, came without family or support. One of the staff from the nursing home brought the patient, but like a lot of times what happens is it's a transport staff, and so the staff member actually didn't know anything about the patient, what was going on at the facility. And so to say that the encounter was difficult is a very low statement, right? Because this patient, as I have learned now, this was a more advanced patient, so she had trouble communicating. Her vocabulary was very decreased, so it was hard to get a good story on how she was doing and what could we do to help her. The physician I was working with at the time, I thought, did a great job, but the best that he could. I tried to call a family member while they were in the room, couldn't get a hold of anybody. But that was my representation of what HD was. I had an N of 1, so I had one patient that I had seen as a resident with Huntington's disease. And so I want to go through some misperceptions that people can have of HD, and I don't think that it's at the fault of us. It's a rare disease, and not every provider has an opportunity to see what Huntington's looks like. And so some of the, I picked 3 misperceptions, okay, that I may or may not have had. Again, it's hard for me to remember back before when I didn't know about HD, but these are some of the things that I've actually heard students say, residents say, or people that I've worked with. Okay. Number 1, HD only affects adults. Okay, I think a lot of us know this is not true. All right, but there was a time when we did not know this. So when George Huntington first described Huntington's disease, he described it as an adult onset disease. And so the first descriptions we have of HD were only in adults. And it wasn't actually, I think there was a case report 16 years later, so the first case described of a child that maybe had HD, But again, if there's just one report, it's not something that gets widely accepted in the community. It wasn't until Nancy Wexler and her team went to Lake Maracaibo, saw a lot of kids with Huntington's disease, found the Huntington's gene, did their publications. So it wasn't until 1983 where it was actually widely accepted that juvenile HD was a real entity. And right, 1983, it was a while ago, right? But not too long ago. And so a lot of providers that are more, have more wisdom that are practicing may not, right, may have trained during a time when this was only perceived as an adult onset disease. Great. Okay, but I know we know that now that is different. And so just one other comment. So juvenile Huntington's disease is a rare presentation of a rare disease, which is also something important to keep in mind. So there will be a lot of physicians and providers out there that have never seen juvenile Huntington's disease. And so it's up to all of you to take, the information that you learn about HD and educate the community. And also one of HDSA's missions. All right. HD doesn't present after the age of 60. I actually just heard this one 2 weeks ago from a medical student. So we had a patient coming in to be evaluated for Huntington's disease. This patient was an 82-year-old man. And before we even went to see the patient, the student turned to me and said, "Oh," they're like, "Well, this is silly. Why is this referral for Huntington's? This can't be Huntington's. This patient's 82 years old." And then I think he read the expression on my face and said, "Well, wait, could it be HD?" And so I took some time to, educate that HD can present at any age. Now, yes, presenting after the age of 60 is also a rare presentation of a rare disease, but does not mean it does not happen. And so a review in 2017 looked at all the case reports and case studies of late onset Huntington's, which is after the age of 60, and it is also rare. About 10% of cases will present at a later age. All right, and then my last one. This one frustrates me probably more than all of the others. That I hear this, unfortunately, from students, residents, other providers not taking care of Huntington's patients, that since there's no cure for Huntington's disease, there's nothing we can do. Right, and that's completely untrue, right? Whenever I hear someone say this that's not a neurologist or is, another physician, say, well, tell me, can you cure type 1 diabetes? So should you not treat type 1 diabetes? Of course you treat type 1 diabetes. So of course we treat Huntington's. We have a lot of treatments that treat movement symptoms or behavioral symptoms, make quality of life better, can really affect patients' lives. Great. So we'll just cross all those out and add some truth statements, right? Huntington's symptoms can present at any age, right? And we have a lot of therapies to treat Huntington's disease symptoms. And I like to find some of those providers once we have it here and tell them otherwise. Okay. There's also a lot of free resources I wish I had known about when I was a young trainee. So when I became a fellow, I participated in the CME4HD, which is a great program. I took it when you had to pay a little fee and it was in person, and now it is completely free and online. And so you can do it at any time. There's also this nice book. No, I think on Zoom you guys can't see. This is also a free book on HDSA's website, Physician's Guide to the Management of HD. So I was made aware of this as soon as I became a fellow and was told to download and have available right away. And then also there are additional resources for healthcare professionals on HDSA's website. Great. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. All right, so I have disclosure that I like to do bird watching in my free time. So this is a photograph I took about a month ago. We were out at the lake Memorial weekend, and there was a flock of geese. And it was just so beautiful. All of a sudden, they all started to take off all at the same time out of the water. Just a beautiful phenomena. And it got me thinking about the geese as I was preparing this talk. Did you ever see a goose on its own? Do you ever see a Canadian goose on its own? Not really, right? Well, I thought, let's ask Google. All right, so Canadian geese mate for life. Okay, they mate until, or they will stay with the same partner until their partner passes away. then sometimes they never find another partner. Sometimes they do, but they will always join a new flock. Okay, geese will never stay alone. They always need the support of their family or whatever flock of geese they join. Interestingly, also, if they don't go on to have any more offspring, they will take care of the flock's offspring. So what a great example of community and how important the family support system is. Great. Couldn't get through a PowerPoint without a bird photograph. All right. And so I'm going to go through a few stories. So some patient interactions that I've had over the years. And some of the important points I think that I wish I would have known earlier in my career and would have thought about, brought up, and discussed. Okay, one is being an advocate. So we've talked about this several times already. But so thinking about that first patient I saw as a resident that I described, right? She had no advocate. She had no one to speak for her, to talk for her, to help us understand how she was doing. I contrast that with the second patient I saw, okay, which was when I was a fellow, a first-year fellow. So this was a patient who was coming to the clinic because of her mother. So her mother recognized what she called tics in her daughter, okay? Tic movements, she said, of her face, some like throat clearing, kind of sniffing, which had kind of gotten worse over the past year. She's like, I know HD's in the family because her father had HD, but she's like, this isn't what chorea looks like. I know this isn't chorea. She's like, but I don't know what this is, and could this be HD? And so that's why she brought the patient to the clinic. So as a young fellow, I saw her, I was like, gosh, these do look kind of like tics. They don't really look like classic chorea. And so I was confused because in the textbook it says chorea. Well, HD is not just a disease of chorea. I like to call it a mixed hyperkinetic movement disorder, right? Chorea is the classic symptom, but you can have tic-like movements, you can have dystonia or forced muscle contractions, you can have slowness of movement, problems with coordination, balance problems, and in HD, it's very unlikely that you just have chorea. Almost always it's going to be a combination. And so we did gene testing in her because I'm like, gosh, it has to be HD, right? And so she did end up having Huntington's disease. But that's something I wish I would have known a little bit earlier, that there's multiple different types of presentations of Huntington's, even in the adult form. And so it was really, I say that I tell the story in association with being an advocate because it was really her mom that got her tested, as soon as possible. We got her started on treatment to help her symptoms, got her plugged into our Center of Excellence, and got her the resources she needed. Right. Number 2. Speak up. So again, also kind of goes with being an advocate. So I had another patient that I saw whose was on kind of, what you described about having a diagnostic odyssey, okay, meaning that going from multiple doctors to try to find the answer of the diagnosis, not getting a straight answer, sometimes conflicting answers or diagnoses. And so Parkinson's was also in this patient's differential diagnosis odyssey list. So she actually came to me with her diagnosis, but her husband kind of, divulged what all they went through to find me. And that she had seen multiple different neurologists, first diagnosed with Parkinson's, then diagnosed with not Parkinson's, but I don't know what you have, then diagnosed with an atypical Parkinson's disorder, and then her husband, who I'm not sure if he searched Dr. Google or used another source, which I'm not saying to use Dr. Google, but really advocated to try to figure out what's going on. And so he went to her primary care and said, hey, I've been reading, like no one's mentioned anything about Huntington's disease. We don't have a family history, but gosh, some of these symptoms seem consistent with HD. The primary care is like, well, I've never seen HD, so let's send a test. And sure enough, it came back positive. But gosh, I don't know how they would have gotten to the right diagnosis had it not been for her spouse. Really pushing to get the test and to get the diagnosis. So don't be afraid to speak up. I think the primary care was very thankful they got the diagnosis, and he learned a lot about Huntington's disease. And we'll never miss it again, I'm sure. All right, being aware of burnout. Okay, this is more so for the family and the support system. So having HD is hard. Being a care partner or a caregiver or a family member is also hard. And how you are doing as a person reflects the type of care you can provide to your loved one. And so this is something as a physician that early on, I don't remember thinking much about or focusing much about when I was having the clinic visit, recognizing how does it look like, caregiver or the family member is doing, right? Because we're here to see the patient. But in Huntington's disease, right, it's a family disease. It involves more than just one person. So remembering to always take care of yourself first so that you can take care of your loved one. And stay positive, because your mood is so contagious. If you're upbeat, you're positive, people around you are going to become positive. If you're having a bad day, you're irritable, you're cranky, I know when someone's irritable to me, it makes me want to be irritable too, right? You have to stop and think, okay, I'm feeling that from you, but I don't need to project that as well. So just some tips. All right. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the power of the multidisciplinary team. Right, so I think this makes sense to everybody. If you have a lot of different providers with expertise all working together to treat the same patient, you're going to get a great outcome, right? If you've only got one provider who doesn't have a lot of expertise but knows a little bit about everything, you may not get as good of care, okay? But you really, I think, don't see how much this affects quality of life until you're a part of it. And so it's convenient if you go to a center of excellence and you can see all the different providers at once. Right, that's great. This is actually a list of our huge center of excellence. We have all of these available multidisciplinary team members, most who are present at the clinic visit. And it's not just about medications, about therapy. It's about having a team that the unified theme and goal is to help HD patients in the HD community. Because then you have someone who knows about HD, has read about HD, wants to know what's the best treatment for HD. And that's going to be better care than if you go to someone who doesn't know what HD is. Now, I think one of our goals is to try to help educate more people so there are more people out in the community that also know about HD. And I think one more. All right, so I'm going back to my first slide. So this is a picture of our multidisciplinary team at UAB in the top right. And so it's not just that we work together to take care of patients, but we're all a part of the HD community. And so that is the other part that I wish I knew early on in my career before I knew I was going to work with Huntington's disease and be drawn to HD, is just how tight the community is, especially for a rare disease. It is phenomenal how HD community can get together. We have our annual HD Hope Walk every year. This is from a few years ago when it was, gosh, I don't know what year that was. Is it purple? Okay. And then this was our last Hdsa meeting in Boston with our social worker at the time. And so just kind of want to leave with that. The two things that I've been amazed by with HD is the community support, the involvement and advocacy of patients and families, but also the research. And so I know you had mentioned, Katie, about research, not having a lot of research options in 2005. But it has just exploded. Even since I was in medical school, I would have had no idea that we're talking about gene therapy, like gene-targeted therapy for HD. So that's just phenomenal. And so I think that's it. That was my last slide.
Thank you all. I do want to give a plug for Hdsa for some of the things our speakers talked about. I know Lori mentioned the importance of disability. We do have a disability attorney on staff. Her name is Allison Bartlett. She is available to you. Her contact information is on our website, so please utilize her and her services. She's wonderful. We also have access to support groups on our website. One's for caregivers, one's for individuals at risk, and some who are symptomatic. And they're virtual, or you can find ones that are available in your local community. So those are resources that are available to you. And with that, I'm going to open up the Q&A questions. It doesn't look like we have any here in the chat. Does anyone have any questions here in the room? I'll just repeat the question back so our online audience could hear.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I have a question for Katie. So you mentioned your dog a lot. How important is your dog in your mental health and and
He drives me
being supported.
crazy. Does anybody have a dog? Like a puppy? Yeah. Like, I thought not having kids and getting a puppy would be, like, easy. Because, like, you don't have kids to mess up all the training. It's, like, really hard. Oh, my gosh. But she's super cute. And she likes to get dressed up. And, like, it is... Yeah, I got pictures. I'll show you after. You know, it's nice to have like this companion to go. I have to go out and walk her. You know, even if it's like really cold, we have to go out and do something. So, you know, she kind of in a way keeps me active. We live in the Adirondack Park, so like there's a lot of hiking. So she does like to go hiking, and we take her on trails. We go paddle boarding last year, at least, when she was like a third the size she is right now. But taking her out on lakes and, you know, getting her to like being on water and being on the paddleboard, because I do want that to be something that we can do moving forward. Because I do think it's important to stay active and stay moving. And ultimately, I do want to train her as a therapy dog. There's no hope of that right now. But, you know, to get her so that she can come into my facility, you know, or wherever I'm working and work with patients, and eventually be able to bring her here to convention. But yeah, she just drives me nuts. I need therapy for the dog. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I think having that, as long as you're able to, you know, take care of it, and is a great asset to life. You know, having somebody to talk to who's not going to talk back.
We had one question come in online, I think maybe for you, Marissa. Would you treat your mental health and chorea early and aggressively, or is it not necessary?
I think it's on. Okay. Well, I advocate for treating early. If you're having problems with your mental health, having problems with movements, why not treat them? Right? There's no reason to not treat it. Treating it now does not mean that you can't treat it later, or that effect is not going to be as good. So I would recommend getting treated right away. And I think, Lori, you want to talk about your dog?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna say we also have a dog, and I think it is really good for Blake. It gives him something to. He takes care of her. He'll walk her. It gives him something to look forward to. He makes sure that she's fed, because a lot of times I'm focused on feeding him. I'll forget about the dog, so he's always taking care of her, and it's just a really good. Something he can manage, and I think that that's good for him. So yeah. Mine's 9 years old, though. Mine will never be a therapy dog.
We had another question come in online, I think any of our panelists can answer. So 2 of our 4 adult children found out that they were positive soon after my husband did in summer 2020. They don't want to learn about HD or support groups at this point, so I wonder how I should best support them. It's also hard having them disengage when we could use the support too. What are your thoughts?
I think when it's hard when you want your family to be, you know, learning or just having a better understanding. But, you know, one thing to do would be to get involved in the support groups yourself. You know, that way then you're learning the information, you're able to share with other people, so that when your family members do come to you, you can, you know, direct them on where to go or help them get the information that they need. So just kind of being as involved as you can for yourself, so that then you can be a resource.
And I'll just add to what Katie said is, the individual who is dealing with this, they should go ahead and try to lean in as best they can. There will be other people in the support groups or in the community that are in the same exact situation. I kind of felt like I knew Blake had something. I didn't know it was HD. By the time we realized what it was, he was ready to get involved. I backed down a little bit because I wasn't ready. I did go to Dr. Google and looked it up, and I just basically shut the laptop because I said, it's Parkinson's. I can't deal with that. So I didn't deal with it for a little bit. I think it would have been better for my mental health and for me had I leaned in, had I said, okay, it is Huntington's disease, what can I do? Once I started to do that, it was easier for me to talk about it to people, to then relay information to our friends. Ask them, Blake is not going to call you to ask you to go to dinner. You're going to have to be the one to ask us, and I try to, but so it engages his friends so they have more control over how they engage with him. But yeah, I would recommend that they reach out, and they can call me, call any of the panelists, get in touch with Hdsa, and just take care of themselves, because it's a real, if they believe, well, they do, they got diagnosed, they got the genetic testing. Yeah, it's a journey, and there's so many people that are here to help them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's all our questions from my mind.
So I was just going to add to that, or I guess my advice, support groups are great, right? If you want to talk about HD, we've got people that want to talk about HD. And so that's a great place to get that resource. There's also, for anyone having problems with mental health, right? There's free Amwell resources where you can talk to a counselor through Hdsa as well. There's 8 free sessions per year. And to also be patient and remember everyone's acceptance of HD occurs at different times. And I like the advice that was given about learn as much as you can so that when that person's ready, you're ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll copy that question.
Yeah.
What is a good person at Hdsa to email you to email us back?
What can I ask specifically what you were looking for? So to kind of paraphrase, we're looking for specific resources on the Hdsa website. I will say that, typically the info at hdsa.org is supposed to be filtered through to the different departments. So you are ultimately, for your question in terms of care and a care question, that would be filtered to our mission team. So Eric Johnson is our Chief Mission Officer. I believe his email address is listed under contacts on our website. And we also have several other members of our mission team that work directly with our Centers of Excellence. That would be Deb Levecki. And so there are different people on that team who could better address that question, and their email addresses are there. Yeah. Of course, of course. Any other questions? Okay, and with that, I would like to, do you guys have other?
Well, I was just going to ask a question. There it is.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask a question. We talk about the Hdsa Centers of Excellence. There's a lot of them listed on the website. It's grown in the number of places that are a Center of Excellence. But what about for the people that don't live near a Center of Excellence? What would your advice to them be?
That is a great question. So in addition to Centers of Excellence, there are partner sites. So I would assume, so you can look for partner sites. So for in Alabama, for example, we have a partner site in Southern Alabama at University of South Alabama, right? That we are in communication and we are helping foster their site to become a Center of Excellence. If not, I would reach out to a Center of Excellence social worker and see if they have resources for providers, physicians, therapists that are local in the area. And find the closest Center of Excellence to you and try and get resources that way. That would be my advice. But that's a great question. We're trying to get all 50 states, right?
Yeah.
And we're getting there.
Yeah.
We just got Mississippi last year.
Yeah.
I'm a physical therapist, and I learned about the same amount of information you did, Marissa, in my studies as well. Do you think that with the increased number of studies that are occurring on HD, that the education has changed for medical professionals with this new information? Like, I don't know if you're working with students, do they know more now than what you did back then because of studies and researches that have been going on now?
Great. So the question was from one of our physical therapists in the audience who also got similar amount of training of Huntington's disease and her education as I did. And the question was whether that has changed over time as there's more excitement with HD and research and clinical trials. And my response will be a little biased. So I am heavily involved with the medical students, as is Dr. Sung, who leads our neuroscience module. So we definitely focus on Huntington's. And what I've started to do is I actually provide videos of patients. So when patients come to see me, if they give consent that I can use their video for teaching purposes, I show those videos to students. So even if they don't see that person in the room, they're seeing what it looks like. Because reading about what a movement disorder looks like is so much different than seeing it. And so I'm hoping that with that, extra education, that it's helping future generations recognize HD earlier.
I know we're gonna have a conversation because I mean there are facilities like long-term care facilities that do have Huntington's disease units or kind of specialize in it. So being able to bring medical students into like a long-term care facility, like I said, we'd have a whole day that they'd come and they'd do rounds. So that's something that maybe
That
you
sounds
can
like a
add to
great
your
virtual option.
Yeah, because it is important to get to teach them young. Come on, you know you got something.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time and giving us your perspectives. And with that, you've got 30 minutes back for your afternoon. So I hope you enjoy some of what Atlanta has to offer. And we will see you later for the NYA Talent Show.
Thank you for the questions.